The Miami Hurricanes will beat the Virginia Cavaliers if
you are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today, even during these toughest of times for the Canes. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. I've said it so many times throughout the week. I am very anxious to see how Miami performs Saturday, 12:30 p.m. in Charlottesville against the Virginia Cavaliers, because I think this game is going to show us if, by and large, these players and, even these coaches have kind of checked out for the rest of this year, or if there's still a lot of fight left in these players. Because certain players, when they were down and out at the end of that Duke game, it seemed like they were checking out. And you've even had like players' moms tweeting angry things about some of the coaches. Like it's getting pretty ugly, man. So I want to see how much fight, how much bounce back, how much perseverance these players have against a very beatable Virginia Cavaliers team. They're probably saying the same thing about us. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by Underdog. Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code Locked On and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. So, the same way I can look at this game and say, man, Virginia is one of the worst teams in the ACC. Same thing for Miami, right? This Virginia team is not good. They probably look at the Canes, their fans, and say, yeah, we can get a win this week. So here are my keys to the game. We give you 4 or 5 keys every week. I've got a full fiver for you. I got 5 keys to the game for the Miami Hurricanes, favored by 2.5 at the Virginia Cavaliers. And as we always do, in a couple days, we're going to look back on these keys to the game and see how Miami did compared to our expectations heading in. But I can confidently say if you accomplish all 5 of these keys, you win the game easily. If you accomplish 3 or 4 out of the 5, you probably win a close one. That's usually the way, it would go if they do win the game. Key number 1. This one is evergreen, and it does apply again for this matchup, big time. Run the football. This is the weakest part of Miami's offense, but it's also the weakest part of Virginia's defense. The Cavaliers rank 11th in the conference out of 14 in stopping the run. They give up 147.5 rushing yards per game. Now, Miami has had problems both with their backs and with their O-line. The bigger problem, I think, the even bigger problem has been with the O-line because they're just so injured and so banged up. So for this game, obviously I've got reservations about Jalen Knighton, who's fumbled so many times this year. 3 times in the last 4 games he's lost fumbles, hasn't looked like himself. Thad Franklin, for whatever reason, was not used at all last week. I don't know if he's getting out of that doghouse anytime soon because I don't think he was injured. So for this game, I would obviously lean heavily on Henry Parrish, who I believe should start. Knighton started last week, but that was Parrish was just coming back from injury. So hopefully he's more fit and more healthy this week. So I would start Parrish. I would lean heavily on Henry Parrish and Lucius Stanley in this one. Lucius Stanley, he's shown an ability to pick up tough yards this year in a way some of our other running backs can't. Miami's rushing offense, we know that they're not good. They rank 12th in the ACC out of 14 teams. Hurricanes average just a little over 130 rushing yards per game, going up against a rushing defense that gives up 147.5. Something's got to give. I don't necessarily expect Miami to go over 147 rushing yards, but I want them to be over 100. My goal for last week was rush for 150 plus yards. They obviously didn't do that against Duke. I would love to do that this week. Virginia's rushing defense is not very good. Miami hasn't been able to take advantage of those. Try to take advantage of that today. Key number 2. Probably could have led off with this one because it's very important. Play for pride and play for each other. Because, guys, the only way Miami loses this game is to beat themselves. They beat themselves against Duke with 8 turnovers. They beat themselves even at Texas A&M. We didn't realize how bad A&M was at that time. Miami beat themselves with special teams miscues and red zone failures in that A&M game. Miami beat themselves against Middle Tennessee by taking the opponent lightly. Miami tried to beat themselves against Virginia Tech by committing 17 penalties for 159 yards. Las Vegas cannot figure this team out. So Miami is favored yet again, right? They're 0-6 against the spread this year. So the betting public, the sharps, they cannot seem to figure Miami out. So yeah, Miami's favored again. And I think the reason why Vegas can't figure this team out is the Hurricanes find ways to lose games through intangibles because the tangibles say they should win. Miami is considerably better than Virginia. So they should win, but they find ways to lose games. Key number 3, keep pressure on the quarterback. Brennan Armstrong this year, he's not lived up to the billing from last season. He's been awful. 4 interceptions in his past 2 games. He's got 9 on the season, which leads the ACC. That's not the type of category you want to lead in. Most interceptions thrown, that's not where you want to be at. So you have to force him into pressing and making poor throws under duress. And of course, one of the strengths of Miami's team, as we've seen pretty consistently throughout the year, when other things have been inconsistent, the pass rush has been relatively consistent this year. Akeem Mesidor, one of the best in the country. Jafari Harvey, when he's on, he's on. He's not necessarily on every game, but he's capable of doing some big things. And Miami's got 2 of the better defensive tackles in the ACC in Darrell Jackson and Leonard Taylor. So just keep the pressure constantly on Brennan Armstrong because he has crumbled under pressure throughout this year. We still have 2 more keys to go for this matchup, including what you have to do to make your quarterback comfortable and, man, more on just the pride Miami needs to show this week. So we're going to talk about that right after we talk about the awesome folks at Underdog Fantasy. This episode is brought to you by Underdog, the easiest place to spice up college football season. It's so easy to get started, and it's so quick to make your selections and play. So you download the free Underdog app on your iPhone or your Android, or if you prefer just to go the old school route, go to UnderdogFantasy.com. You create your account within minutes. You make a deposit within minutes. Make sure you use our code when you do that. And then you make your selections. Guys, the Pick'em game. The Pick'em game is addicting. You simply select 2, 3, 4, or 5 college football players and predict if they're going to go over or under, higher or lower than their stat projections. And you can win cold, hard cash, guys. It's that simple. It really takes a minute, sometimes less than a minute, to make your selections, guys. So I go to that Underdog Fantasy every single week. Make your own picks this week. It's easy to play and available in over 30 states. You just pick between 2 and 5 players across any team, not just our Canes, and decide if they're going to finish higher or lower. One of the easiest fantasy to play games out there. You can win cold hard cash in a single game. So guys, here's how you sign up and use our code. Sign up with our promo code, Locked On, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's one word, Locked On. Deposit $100, get $100 free. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store, Google Play Store. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On. Get in on the college football pick'em action today. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today on this Friday. We are available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So our top 3 keys, let me run those back for you. Run the football. We've been saying that every single week, and we haven't done it since week 3. Texas A&M was the last time Miami ran the football effectively. Got to do it this time against one of the worst rushing defenses in the conference. Key number 2, play for pride and play for each other. Keep your heads up. We're going to find out who can play and who can't, or who wants to be here and who doesn't. Key number 3, pressure Brennan Armstrong. The Virginia quarterback has thrown 4 INTs in his past 2 games. He's thrown 9 on the season. He's thrown 6 touchdowns to 9 interceptions this year. Key number 4, let's go to Miami's quarterback for this one. Simplify things for Jake Garcia. We talk a lot this year about offensive coaching, and they've adapted in certain ways. In other ways, they've been too slow to adapt. obviously you have your system and you have your playbook, but you also need to make your personnel as comfortable as possible within the confines of your offense. You've got to meet in the middle, right? You're not just going to go, hey, whatever you guys are comfortable running, we'll let you guys write the playbook. Like, you can't do that, but you do have to find the plays that these guys can execute best. And when you've got an inexperienced backup quarterback, you can't just expect him to be Tyler Van Dyke. He's not Tyler Van Dyke. He's Jake Garcia. And I think he can be an excellent quarterback, but you have to adapt to Jake Garcia and simplify things if you have to. Because is it just me, or did Jake, he looked unprepared and out of sync in the Duke game? Made me wonder how well he knows the playbook. It makes me wonder how much he's worked with some of his receivers. I guess I can understand why maybe a guy like Colby Young, who's not been around although he and Colby Young had an okay connection. It was the other guys he didn't have a connection with. He and Colby Young and he and Will Mallory were fine together. It looks like he and Frank Ladson were kind of out of sync. But yeah, it made me wonder how well Jake actually knows the playbook. Because remember, before the North Carolina game, you remember how Tyler Van Dyke spent those extra meeting sessions. He spent extra time with Josh Gaddis, the OC, and Frank Ponce, the quarterback's coach, to tailor the playbook to his strengths, to identify the plays he's most comfortable running with and throw the plays out that he's not comfortable running. So I hope they've done the same thing with Jake Garcia this week. You need to have those extra sessions to make sure he's prepared. He's talented, Jake, but he's inexperienced. Do whatever you have to do to make him comfortable. You can't just expect him to be Tyler. He's not Tyler, okay? And also, make sure he's getting the football out of his hands quickly, right? Because Virginia's defense is not bad, guys. They've got a good pass rush. And, Miami's offensive line, with how many injuries they've had, they're not protecting their quarterbacks well. Tyler Van Dyke got injured on a hit, and Jake Garcia took some hits and was under a lot of duress last week. So he's got to get rid of the football quickly, okay? And that's on him, and it's on the coaching for putting him in positions to do that. Key number 5. Normally, I would say start fast. That's usually one of my keys. Miami's been doing a better job of that recently, right? They looked dynamite starting the Duke game, right? It looked like, we may score 40 today. So I'm not going to say start fast this week. I'm just going to say finish strong. That's my key. That's what Miami's been failing to do, finish these games, right? They nearly blew it against Virginia Tech, and they had a horrible finish against Duke. Even though Miami, they're the team that practices daily in 100% humidity, yet they've looked tired in the fourth quarter compared to their opponents. So I believe this game is going to be close right up until the final 5 minutes, because I don't think either of these teams is good enough to create separation, right? We can make as many Duke football jokes as we want to make, but Duke is a much better team than Virginia. I don't think Virginia is good enough to build a big lead in this game, nor do I believe Miami will build a big lead in this game, because we find a way to shoot ourselves in the foot and implode every single week. So you've got to finish strong. I think right up until the final 2 possessions, final 5 minutes, this is going to be a 1-score game. I need to see Miami finish games the way they've started games over the last couple of weeks. So those are my 5 keys, and we will compare notes early next week. Did these match up to reality? Run the football, play for pride and for one another, right? Because if you're, even if you start thinking, hey, the season's over, well, what is this worth? No, please play for pride, guys. Because also we got Florida State coming up in a little over a week. So I want to have some momentum heading into that game. Number 3, keep pressure on Brennan Armstrong, the UVA quarterback. Number 4, simplify things for Jake Garcia, make him as comfortable as you can. And number 5, finish strong, because Miami has not been doing that. Guys, drop your predictions. Leave us a comment on our YouTube channel if you're watching us, or if you're listening to us, you can either leave us an Apple Podcast review. We love 5-star reviews, by the way. If you could leave us a 5-star review from the bottom of my heart, I will thank you so much for that. Leave us a 5-star Apple Podcast or Spotify or Google Podcast review. You can also tweet us at Locked On Canes. And if you follow us at Locked On Canes, we will follow you back. How about that? And guys, enjoy the game tomorrow. Drop us your predictions in the comments and on Twitter. Does Miami win this game, and by how much? Or did they lose this game, and by how much? And make sure you make Locked On Sports Today, your second listen today. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So we will talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.